Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Coffee and Conversation, Saturday, October 12th. This is the last coffee before the election. I hope you are all excited, motivated, and working hard. You can work hard in lots of different ways. I mean, Lynn, bless her heart, has organized so many things for the Bianca Vernig campaign, which spills over into the entire district. And that's wonderful. But every time you're talking to somebody, every time you're talking to somebody is an opportunity to do something for this election. So wherever you are, if you're in the grocery store, wear your t-shirts, wear your buttons. Ask your friends and acquaintances, are they planning to vote? And if you can, if it's comfortable, who are you planning to vote for? You'll get a sense. I had a fun experience with one of my coworkers. The easy question for young people, and Jill and Cynthia, you might appreciate this, is what's your position on Taylor Swift in this election? And if you get thumbs up, that tells you a lot. Unfortunately, the young man I asked about that said, she's just another billionaire. Now, that's curious because if you don't like billionaires, that should indicate what your political persuasion is. But no, not with him. He just didn't quite get that she had a political perspective. In any event, enough of my proselytizing. Let's get on to reproductive freedom with old friend Cynthia Calais and new friend Jill Locke from Pro-Choice Minnesota. Let's start with the two of you introducing yourselves and your organization, what you do, where you fit into the state of Minnesota and issues, and nationally too. I'd like to know that. So you guys figure out who's going first.
Awesome. And I should have mentioned before this that we do have a PowerPoint.
Oh,
So
good.
I know I can't screen share, but I'm not sure the best way to do that.
Okay, Curtis, can you open that up for her?
Oh,
Cynthia,
I
you're
just
in
made
it.
her a co-host.
Okay.
Awesome. I promise I won't do anything weird. Well, good to be with everybody this morning in a different capacity. I know most of you, but my name's Cynthia Calais, and I am the PAC chair and the vice chair of Pro-Choice Minnesota. We are a C3 and a C4 here in Minnesota, organizing around abortion access and reproductive freedom. Jill, do you want to introduce yourself? Oh, Jill, you're muted.
Good morning. My name is Jill Locke. I use she, her pronouns. I am the organizer for Pro-Choice Minnesota. And I'm just, in my previous life, I was a nurse, a public health nurse, and I'm a mom, and I've always been a community organizer. So.
Awesome. Thanks, Jill. And Jill, we're a small but mighty team. We're currently in a search for a new executive director. So I'm kind of filling in that role today, but we're really excited to be here, specifically to talk through. Jill has to hop off a little early, so we're going to start kind of in grounding us in what Pro-Choice Minnesota does, our mission, who we are, and then I'll kind of roll. I'm not a lawyer, Ron, sorry to disappoint, but I'm going to roll into the current state of abortion here in Minnesota and kind of some history, and then what we're doing this election cycle and how things are looking specifically on the campaign trail for keeping the pro-choice trifecta here in Minnesota. So
Cynthia, I have the misfortune of being a recovering lawyer, so I can't speak to some of the decisions. I went back and looked at some of them, but I was hoping we would have other legal minds on the call, and maybe people who are on the call have that knowledge, even if they don't have the JD behind their name. So go ahead.
Well, I'm not a lawyer, luckily. I worked at a law office once and decided it wasn't for me, and here I am. So I'll turn it over to Jill. Jill?
Yes. Yeah. Let's see. And apologies again that I have to leave early. I actually am on my way to a door knock. So it's a good reason to go leave. But today is period action day, and I have a period action door knock with Representative Feist to get to. So Pro-Choice Minnesota was founded in 1966, before abortion was legalized in the United States, so pre-Roe. The mission of PCM is to build collective power to remove barriers, strengthen protections, and expand access to abortion and all reproductive health care in Minnesota. And we have two legs on which we stand. We are a 501c4 and a 501c3. The C4 aims to develop and sustain a constituency that uses the political process to guarantee every woman person has the right to make personal decisions regarding the full range of reproductive choices, including preventing unintended pregnancy, bearing healthy children, and choosing legal abortion. And our C3, our Pro-Choice Minnesota Foundation, protects reproductive freedom through education, training, advocacy, and organizing. So programming is a big component of what we do. Our most popular program is our clinic escort program. It is a way to directly service people seeking abortions. We train activists to safely escort people seeking abortion care into abortion clinics. We currently escort at the two independent clinics in Twin Cities, Whole Women's Health in Bloomington and the Robbinsdale Clinic in Robbinsdale. We are in need of more assistance at the Bloomington Clinic. If anyone has an interest, we do have a training, off the top of my head, I believe November 17th is our next training, and they always give me hope. Typically, we have about 40 to 50 people sign up for each training that we run quarterly. So it's nice to just get a visual of how important this is to people and that they're willing to give up some free time to take care of each other. So
Jill, I certainly have heard in the past about episodes, untoward, unfriendly episodes outside of clinics. I've not heard that in the news recently, and maybe it's just been overshadowed by other violence in Republican politics. How big a deal is it at this point in time?
pretty big deal. There's an injunction at the Robbinsdale Clinic, and the Robbinsdale Clinic is in danger of closing due to finances, which is a piece of the puzzle we'll get to later. But the Robbinsdale Clinic, a anti-choice person owns the property next door, and they've installed a deer stand so that protesters can stand up on the deer stand and look over and down at the people seeking care and heckle them. And at the Whole Women's Health Clinic in Bloomington, there's some construction going on, and there's rules about where you can be public property, private property, and there's stakes right now marking boundaries, and the protesters will move the stakes and block the driveway. It's an ongoing issue at the Whole Women's Health Clinic there. So, yep.
So how do you get the law enforced that prevents that from happening? And what are the terms of the injunction over in Robbinsdale?
Oh gosh, yes, I am not a lawyer either. I'm like trying to remember exactly down to like the details of the injunction.
Do your best.
Yeah, so some people access the Robbinsdale Clinic by bus, and so they approach the clinic by walking, and there's some rules around like engaging with people on the sidewalk as they walk from the bus stop into the clinic. And I don't remember all of it. I have a lovely volunteer, Amy Shutt, who is a lawyer and helps me run the program, and she has details of the injunction more than I do. And at Whole Women's Health, it is an ongoing problem in general. Speaking of how to phrase this, we prefer not to involve law enforcement as much as possible, because you don't know the people seeking care, their relationship with police officers. You don't know the stance of the police officer responding as far as how they feel about abortion care, et cetera, and adding cops to the picture doesn't always help things. So we prefer the escorts to keep their focus on the patients. And yeah, you have a question, Ron?
Oh no, sure. I always have a question. Have you connected with the chiefs of police in Bloomington and Robbinsdale?
Robbinsdale, like the injunction is, we can't stop the protesters from protesting and heckling people. But the injunction is working pretty well there. In Bloomington, the police have unfortunately had to be involved at different times. The clinic makes the decision about when to involve police or not. And I believe there are ongoing discussions between the clinic and policing about the situation. And it will be better once the construction is completed as well. So,
Okay.
but we try to keep our focus on the patients and serving them.
Sure.
So,
I'm
yeah.
curious about the places that you provide this support, the 2 independent clinics in the Twin Cities. It begs 2 questions. What about the non-independent clinics, and why only the Twin Cities?
Yes, so Planned Parenthood are the other, every other abortion clinic in the area is a Planned Parenthood, and they run their own clinic escort program. And then the other 2 independent clinics in the state, in Duluth and in Moorhead, both run an in-house clinic escort program. But if anyone knows anyone in Moorhead, I know that they are in need of more clinic escorts. Particularly right now, the anti-choice movement runs a 40 days of for life campaign, and it kind of drives more protesters to abortion clinics in this time of year.
Okay. Continue on.
Yeah, okay. That's our clinic escort program. Like I said, we run trainings quarterly, and then we also have lead escort trainings that we run twice a year. So if anyone has any questions, please free to reach out to me. Another aspect of our programming is our campus organizing program. During the academic year, we hire campus representatives across colleges and universities across the state. Currently, we have campus organizers at 6 campuses: St. Cloud State, McAllister, St. Olaf, Carleton, UMD, and Concordia Moorhead.
Interesting mix of public and private schools. I was curious about that.
Yes, yeah, in Concordia Moorhead is a new campus for us this fall, for which we're very excited. And I am negotiating, hopefully, with a potential organizer to start at Twin Cities. They're organizing for the Harris Walls campaign right now, so they're quite busy. But I'm hoping they'll join us, and we'll add that campus in January. Yeah, we always looking to expand to as many campuses as possible. That's where we stand right now. Right now, they are working on voter registration work and get out the vote work, and as well as educating fellow students about reproductive health care. So.
How's it going with voter registration and get out the vote? And what are you seeing in terms of youth activism? You know, your generation, not mine. It's a big item in the news about whether young
also
people are
not
going
my
to vote.
generation, Ron. I'm a mom of a 17-year-old. Yeah, you know, it's an interesting election cycle. I do find, at least among my campus organizers, they're much more knowledgeable about the political process and much more engaged than I ever was as a college student. And I mean, this is anecdotal. I have a 17-year-old. Her I'm trying to think if it was a lifeguard. My 17-year-old was a lifeguard this summer. And when it was made public that Kamala Harris was going to be the nominee, they were at a party and they all celebrated. They were like cheering for Kamala. So I'm pretty proud of young people and their engagement this cycle.
Do you get more of a sense of turnout in that group this time around than 4 years ago or 8 years ago, or were you not involved enough to know that?
I was pretty involved in 2020 and 2022, but in 2022, pretty involved with college students. I feel like they are more engaged. That would be my kind of intuition about it. As far as the actual data, I am not sure. We made a relationship with Empower, who does relational organizing, and they just sent me their national report, and they're reaching out to like first-time voters, and they've had like 1.2 million conversations across the United States, and they target just college students. So that's pretty exciting data to get in from Empower, that our campus organizers are part of that.
Sure. You know, one of the things that's important and that people sometimes don't focus on enough, I suspect a number of people on this call do, but the news media isn't close to focusing on enough, and that is down ballot races, not only federal races, but for your purposes, the state races, the state house in particular. And one thing I'm not sure about, and maybe Jim Carlson can answer this, is whether there are any state Senate seats that are on the ballot this time around. I mean, there certainly are some openings, I think most prominently of Kelly Morrison when she's going to be elected to the US House. What's going on to fill those seats? And
Yeah.
Jill, if you know, answer. If not, Jim Carlson, I'd love to have you jump in on that one.
We could go to our next slide, which is the third leg of our programming, is our RFAN, our Reproductive Freedom Action Network. It's made up of volunteers across the state who work on education, abortion access, and also right now, the work of RFAN is electing pro-choice legislators to the state house and the state senate. So in Senate District 45, Kelly Morrison's former seat, Ann Johnson Stewart is the Democratic nominee and a PCM endorsed candidate. And we have been out door knocking for Ann more times than I can count. And if anyone wants to door knock for Senate District 45 for Ann Johnson Stewart, there is a knock at 2 tomorrow. So super important seat, as y'all know, I'm sure that we had a 1-seat majority in the state Senate. And so Ann Johnson Stewart's race in Senate District 45 couldn't be more important. So we've actually done quite a bit of turnout for that race in the form of door knocking.
Yeah,
I see. Door knocking.
Sure. I see Jim Carlson's note in the chat that district's on the ballot, and the Senate district, that Senate district will determine the majority in the Senate. So is that the only state Senate race on the ballot this fall?
Correct.
Okay. Any prognostication from either one of you or Jim?
I don't know what the data is saying. I just keep on turning out volunteers because I know how important that race is. So
okay, at least it was previously a Democratic district, and
exactly.
Senator Morrison held it, I think, pretty handily. So one would be hopeful that the Senate majority would remain. How about the House?
The House, yes. So in case people don't know, before this election cycle, we had a 4-seat majority in the state House. So a DFL majority, a pro-choice majority. And so our RFAN is working very, very hard on keeping that pro-choice majority. We're trying to provide as much support to our endorsed candidates as possible, largely in the form of door knocks. So we have kind of set our priorities based on either seats that are vulnerable or seats that are flippable. And that is where we've been directing the vast majority of our resources. So super important election. Yes.
Ron, we do have kind of a larger analysis about this later too, of where we've been and what we've been doing. But like Jill said, we've been kind of all around the state. Jill, I tried to remember how many districts you said we've been in, but as we'll talk about, it's really going to come down to a few key seats, and we've been able to activate our RFAN network, our Reproductive Freedom Action Network, to knock thousands of doors in some of these swing seats, which we know some of them have come down to like 41A or B, which is the Cottage Grove Hastings. Those are both very close seats, and we've really invested a lot of time and energy there. We've got great candidates over there.
And I've personally gone to Duluth 3 times.
Some of these seats were decided by less than 200 votes. So
3B was 34 votes in 2022. So.
All right. Well, as you can see, I have this habit of asking lots of questions. I will try to defer to your presentation. So go ahead.
I think, is that my last slide, Cynthia?
I think it is. So Jill does a lot of amazing work with our Reproductive Freedom Action Network. I always just say our fans, so it's always kind of a mouthful. Our clinic
Yes.
escorting and our campus organizing. All of that work is so essential. And we've been, like Jill said, organizing around choice since before Roe was overturned. So to kind of back up here and give you a little bit of history of where we're at and where we're going and the work that Pro-Choice Minnesota has done. Gonna give just like a really brief overview. I'll preface this, I'm not a lawyer, and I don't want to be a lawyer, but I'll give you a brief overview of the state of abortion over the last, since Roe was enacted and now where we're at after the Dobbs decision. So
I think you're looking at my notes because I have that exact list on my
yes.
notes in front of me.
So we all know about Roe, which was the landmark Supreme Court decision that ruled that women had a right to have an abortion, which was overturned in 2022. So for 50 years almost, this was the law of the land, and that everybody, no matter where you resided, you had access to the protected right to have abortion care.
So here's a fun historical note. As I understand it, I didn't double check this. The Roe decision came down on January 22nd, 1973. If you think about what was happening in the United States at that point, 1973 was the inauguration of a president. It happened to be Richard Nixon's re-election. The inauguration happened on January 20th, 1973. So the Roe decision came down 2 days after Nixon was inaugurated for his second term, having beaten George McGovern. I don't know if that matters anything, but it's just kind of an interesting historical juxtaposition.
And that Nixon presidency had a long-lasting impacts on the choice movement moving forward, so it's very pertinent, I would say. And then moving forward, the next kind of landmark Supreme Court decision, which was Planned Parenthood versus Casey in 1992, which upheld the right to an abortion established by the essential holding of Roe v. Wade, and addresses this concept called the undue burden standards, which refers to certain laws being too burdensome or restrictive for one's fundamental right to receive care. This case really centered around 5 provisions. It started in Pennsylvania. The scope was these 5 provisions that were held under Roe, which was informed consent, spousal notice. So if you were to want to receive abortion care, your spouse would have to have notice of that and consent to that. Parental consent around the definition of medical emergency, and then some certain reporting requirements, which were all under Roe. So the outcome of this reaffirmed Roe. So this was their first opportunity to really overturn Roe, and they did not in 1992. But it did uphold some of the Pennsylvania provisions, but it did overturn the spousal notice provision. So in application, this is waiting period, spousal notice, parental consent, some of which up until, not to jump too far ahead, in 2023, the legislative session here in Minnesota, some of these laws were in effect in Minnesota after 1992. And this was also overturned by the Dobbs decision in 2022. So to center herein on Minnesota, Doe v. Gomez, which was 1995, so 3 years after the Planned Parenthood versus Casey decision, Minnesota Supreme Court came together and guaranteed every Minnesotan's legal right to terminate a pregnancy. And this remained the protection for rights when Roe was overturned in 2022 until the PRO Act was passed in Minnesota in 2023.
And that's because the Minnesota Supreme Court held that there is a Minnesota constitutional right to abortion, and that made it irrelevant to Dobbs. The U.S. Supreme Court could not interpret the Minnesota Constitution.
Yes. So it's the precursor to the PRO Act, and I want to Alexa, stop. Sorry, Jill, your period action day knock just came up on my calendar. So there are several lawsuits, which I'm sure you've heard about, around the drug mifepristone, which is one of the drugs for that people use to receive abortion care. I want to put a note in here. Dovi Gomez, we have protections here in Minnesota, and there are protections around the country right now. You can still access this drug, and it is still safe and effective to do so. And that we're expanding here in Minnesota to receive that drug via mail. So the thing that I'm sure we all know about, unfortunately, which was Dobbs versus Jackson in 2022, this was what overturned the Supreme Court decision and the constitutional right to an abortion, leaving the decision up to states effectively to determine abortion access. I always like to say, you know, here in Minnesota, our right to an abortion is protected, but our work is so far from done. And Jill alluded to a lot of this work earlier, talking about the number of clinics we have in the state, talking about access, and especially in greater Minnesota, we have a lot of work to do, and we are not done. Excuse me. So that fast forwards to 2023, which I hope you all know, but 2023 was a monumental year here in Minnesota for affirming the right to abortion care. And in the 2023 session, we passed what's called the PRO Act, the Protect Reproductive Options Act, and it was signed into law by Governor, not Goodwin, hopefully future Vice President Tim Walz, with our pro-choice trifecta on January 31st. This was the first bill that was introduced that session because it was after winning the trifecta, it was such an important part of our agenda in winning that trifecta. And so they went in and did it right away. I included the revisor link there because if any of you watched the vice presidential debate, there were a lot of lies about what is legal in Minnesota and, you know, abortion after birth and what Vance said and what Trump has been saying. And this link actually was broken during the vice presidential debate, but that's the bill language. If you're ever interested, or if you are like Ron and have a legal mind and want to read through that bill. I'll also add in 2023, in conjunction with the PRO Act, in the Health and Human Services Omnibus Bill, some of those provisions that I had mentioned, which were the 24-hour waiting rule, rules that required extensive reporting here in Minnesota around abortion care, and some groundwork that could criminalize abortions under circumstances, that was also all overturned. So some of the more restrictive abortion laws that were in effect were overturned in 2023 as well as the PRO Act affirming the right to care. And I know, I'm not sure if Senator Carlson is still on, or I know Representative Ryer was driving, but I want to pause here and just, I'm not in office, and want to give them an opportunity to talk about the PRO Act and passing that. If there's anything
I saw Senator Carlson just put something in the chat, so he's there. And it looks like Representative Vernig is also still on with us. So
oh, great.
Either one of you want to pick up with comments on the PRO Act?
Yeah, I'm Jim Carlson here. I'm not real familiar with all of the details of it, other than it was something that has been intended for years. This is another one of the important issues that we managed to get past simply because of the trifecta, and it's protective of especially women's rights.
Yeah, so that's kind of where things are at here in Minnesota. Like I said, and like Jill and I have been alluding to, we are not done. Pro-choice Minnesota still exists. This fight still exists for a lot of reasons. Oh, sorry, you see your hands raised, Senator Carlson.
Go ahead, Cynthia. I just have a question that's going to steer us off a little bit.
Okay. So where do we go from here? Thanks to the work of our pro-choice trifecta, which we've had DFL trifectas before, but they weren't always necessarily pro-choice trifectas. We have a pro-choice trifecta, which is amazing. We have some of the strongest abortion protections in the country, and that really makes us an island of care here in the Midwest. I saw a study not too long ago that since Roe was overturned, abortion in Minnesota and access to abortion care has rose 36% since then, which it's only been 2 years. However, based on the results of the 2024 elections, we might have to pivot to defense. If we talked about what's on the ballot this year, if we were to lose that pro-choice trifecta, we would have to pivot to a defensive standpoint. However, I'm going to speak positively because we are going to maintain our pro-choice trifecta. The top priority of the Reproductive Freedom Caucus for 2025 is expanding accessibility, primarily through securing funding. So I don't want to speak for the Reproductive Freedom Caucus, but we are working hand in hand with them in making sure that abortion isn't only legal, but it's accessible and equitable for individuals who live in Greater Minnesota, communities of color, and doing some of that work of really ensuring that we have the infrastructure of the increased demand that we are seeing here in Minnesota.
So Jim, you had a question?
Can I jump
Yeah,
in? Because I'm actually at a point where I could talk and drive. I'm
Oh,
sorry to
good.
cut you off, Senator. Is that okay?
Go ahead, Liz.
Oh, okay. So this is so great, and thank you both for being here and doing this presentation. I'm sorry I haven't been more engaged. I just want to give an update from my perspective, both on what we accomplished and how things are looking going into the election. The proactive course was just, it put the standard there that we are going to protect people to make their own reproductive freedom choices, make their own choices and their own decisions. The follow-up that I think was also incredibly important that was alluded to in the Health and Human Services bill is that we took out language that had been overruled by the court so that it was no longer in statute. We did a lot of pieces to reinforce rights for insurance, making the practical coverages available, rates were increased for reimbursement so that it wasn't just a right on paper. We made it easier and easier for people to get the care they needed, and also more affordable for providers to provide that care. So I think that you can expect to see more of that kind of work going forward into the next biennium. And I know that we're working on our list of priorities in the Reproductive Freedom Caucus, which I'm a part of. About the election right now, I've been out at a lot of events lately, and lobbyists are a really good source of information. And so I've been kind of, so what are you hearing about the Senate race, for example? And I am feeling guardedly optimistic about Ann Johnson Stewart's chances. I don't want to bring bad luck by being too optimistic, like happens with Minnesota sports fans. But we've all got to keep working. I'll be out there tomorrow at 2. The Queer Caucus, which I'm also part of, is doing. We're trying to assemble as many of us as possible to be out there, and we just need to keep showing up for Ann if you can. I bet they have phone banks. I bet maybe they're doing a postcard campaign. You can always send a contribution because just like the DFL is pulling out all stops to keep that seat, I am sure that the GOP is using as much organizational power as they have, which seems lacking, to also take it. And so I don't take anything for granted. I appreciate Pro-Choice Minnesota's work so much and your dedication. I'm also feeling like all the work that we're putting in on the house side. Right now, it's feeling, you know, scary, but hopeful. And so just encourage everyone to keep at it. Lynn, thanks for your plugs for all the door knocks coming up. I bet you could call either Bianca or me or our campaign managers anytime and say, hey, I could go out at 3 this afternoon. Are you available? And we would find a way to use people's time. So don't be bound just by when the knocks are. Also say, here's when I could help. What could I do for you? And I can be on a couple more minutes, so in case there's a question.
Cynthia, any questions for Representative Ryer?
No, I think it was great to have someone who's in the Reproductive Freedom Caucus that perspective. So thank you.
Liz, I have just a political statistics question. You're out all the time, not only in your district, but all over the place. What are you seeing in terms of responsiveness of voters this year compared to prior elections? Are we getting more registrations? And again, I know your view is anecdotal. Are we getting more enthusiasm? How's the breakdown on a gender basis, on a race basis, on an age basis? What are you seeing out there in the world?
So I'm going out in my district. I've been going out to just about everybody except Republicans, known Republicans. We've been including all of the no data people. And so I'm getting a pretty good view. And I've also been to Bemidji and Hermantown, and kind of all over. I'm on my way down to Dundas right now. What I hear out in the non-metro area from candidates is that, like Reed Olson up in Bemidji was saying 2 years ago, people were saying, yeah, I'm going to vote for you. I really like you, but I'm not going to put a yard sign in. I don't want to make my neighbors mad. Now they're saying, the heck with my neighbors, give me all the signs you've got. It's really different. People all over the state have been saying how many fewer Trump signs they're seeing than 2 years ago. So not that there aren't the Trump voters, but maybe the Trump enthusiasm is somewhat lessened. I'm hearing total passion around choice. If I don't bring it up, and I ask people, men, women, young, old, what they care about, they talk about reproductive freedom, their themselves, their daughters, their granddaughters, other people's granddaughters. So there's a lot of drive and focus there.
How true is that of the men? How true is that of the men that you talk to? Are the men passionate about the reproductive freedom issue?
Say it again, men, women, old.
Are men
Yeah, no, I said,
passionate?
Ron, I'll say it again. Men, women, young, old.
Okay,
They bring it up. They bring it up. I don't
They
have
bring
to
it
bring
up.
it up.
okay.
Yep, absolutely.
That's outstanding. I still see a fair number of people who are quiet supporters who don't want to put out the signs.
course.
And I hear mixed reviews of friends who've gone up north about the number of Trump signs. Some people say exactly what you just did, and others say they're still seeing a fair number of Trump signs floating around.
I think there's a difference between a fair number and the overwhelming amount before. And I've got a personal little example. I drove to Baraboo, Wisconsin some weeks ago to go hiking. And I mean, I remember driving around in Wisconsin 2 years ago or 4 years ago, and there was just so much, and they were relatively light. And so I think, I'm not saying there isn't Trump support, but I'm just saying
Sure.
what people are telling me is that compared to before, there's a fair amount out there, and they're gross to see and yuck. But GFL has a good presence out there too. So, and it's just not as, you don't drive through there and go, oh, we're doomed. Who are these people? At the same degree. So
That's good. That's
Yeah.
good to hear. That's good to hear.
I have
Um,
to hop off now because I have to pay
Okay.
attention where I'm going so I don't get lost.
Thanks for joining us. Always appreciate your coming on these calls.
I
Um,
appreciate this session very much. I just want to say, and thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Of
Bye-bye.
course. Bianca, I noticed that you've put a couple of comments in the chat. Do you want to weigh in verbally? I can't. Okay. Thank you anyway. That's all right. So Cynthia, I don't know if you have finished your presentation. We keep interrupting you. Do you have more to do?
Yeah, I'll kind of briefly touch on what Representative Breyer was just talking about, which is the 2024 election and what's on the ballot and what we are seeing around choice. So
There's one kind of major topic I don't know that we've covered yet, and I don't know if you're going to go there. So let me just plant the seed and you can talk about it. And that is the relationship of Minnesota's abortion rights to surrounding states and to the country. And I think not only of us versus, all of our surrounding states, but I also think about the South and how if you're in the South, the only place you can go, as I understand it, is Virginia. So I don't know if you have thoughts on the regional and national scene on abortion rights, but if you do, I'd love to have you throw those in.
yeah, absolutely. Like I mentioned, since Roe was overturned, we've seen a massive increase of people coming to Minnesota to access care. We are an island of care in the upper Midwest. We have some of the least restrictive abortion laws in the books. And so that makes us a place where people come to seek care. Countrywide, we do, and I'm struggling to remember which states we do have abortion on the ballot, and we have seen abortion on the ballot since Roe was overturned. And overwhelmingly, we're seeing people turn out for choice. And like Representative Breyer was saying, that is, feeding into our election work. What we're seeing, people still care about choice, no matter what Republicans or anti-choice people are saying. People are still organizing around choice. We are still organizing around choice, and will be until this stops being an issue, which is not anytime soon. Pro-choice Minnesota, we center specifically, I'm the PAC chair, we center specifically on state level races. So while we have amazing people and we do a lot of partnership, we are really focusing on, Ron, what you mentioned, turning out pro-choice candidates or electing pro-choice candidates and turning people out for those lower level races. So we have endorsed in nearly every state house race. It's been a busy few months for us. And then we are identifying some key seats. All of the state house races and that one key state senate seat are up for re-election this year. And we've identified a handful of seats that are going to be really essential of ensuring that we stay a pro-choice trifecta and can continue this work. Moving forward, to ensure we have the infrastructure to handle out of state abortion, people who are accessing our services from out of state, we need to ensure that we're having bonding dollars and having the infrastructure and clinics to support that need. I will say this election is unique because we have 20 legislators who've announced retirement. It's split 50-50, 10 GOP, 10 DFL. And in those seats, some of those are in really important seats. So as I mentioned, I alluded to earlier, 41A and 41B, they're retiring. Their GOP, it is a GOP, the two House seats are GOP, but the senator is DFL. And so those two seats are going to be really important for us to flip to maintain. And then we've got some other seats. I won't go through all the data. I could talk about elections forever, but there are some really important seats. So we've been knocking, I want to say, in about a dozen districts. Jill has been all over the state. I've been all over the state knocking around choice. And one thing that we are seeing around messaging and how anti-choice candidates are messaging is they're really trying to moderate themselves on it. They're trying to say that access to abortion care in Minnesota is settled and they wouldn't be voting to remove that right in Minnesota. We have seen anti-choice people say that. We have seen Trump move away from his stance on abortion, but we know that that's not true. And we have a part of our endorsement process is screening candidates, and there are a number of things that while they believe it's settled law and that access to abortion in Minnesota is there, we also know that they're coming after birth control, they're coming after gay marriage, they are coming after mifepristone. And so we need to ensure that we're electing true pro-choice candidates and pro-choice champions across the state. So, you know, we have been organizing for choice all fall. We have knocked thousands of doors. We've done thousands of events. Jill is very humble, but she is really like the cornerstone to a lot of this work in making sure that we are keeping this pro-choice trifecta. And really over the next few weeks, that's our main goal, as well as supporting our awesome programs that we kind of talked about. So that's us, and that's kind of the state of abortion care here in Minnesota. Ensuring that we remain a pro-choice trifecta is so essential for not only us, but for other states around us who rely on us to get the care that they need. Yeah, I guess I'll pause at any questions. I know Senator Carlson
Sure,
had her hand raised.
I want to remind people to raise their electronic hand if possible. You'll find your hand raised in the reactions button down on the bottom. But one of the things I'm curious about, given that most of the people here are Senate District 52 people, you're door knocking all around the state. But what other areas are you door knocking in this vicinity? You know, if we want to hop in our car, it's not easy to get to Bemidji, but it sure is easy to get to Bloomington.
I will say, I'm trying to think of our targeted districts here, so in terms of incumbents that are really going to be essential, that might be in tighter races, Representative Jess Hansen down in Savage and Burnsville is really a really important seat to keep. I know previously they've invested a lot of resources there to try and flip that seat back to red. Jess is a great candidate though. And then, as I mentioned, not Burnsville, excuse me, Hastings and Cottage Grove, that 41A and 41B seats are really important. And then Ann Johnson Stewart up in Senate District 45, if you feel like going north. You saw some pictures with a knock for Tracy Brazil. I can't remember her number, but she is running against Andrew Myers, a GOP state representative, and we're feeling hopeful about that seat, or at least I am from when I've knocked there. And then Senator Representative Jerry Newton announced his retirement, and Carrie Ruhrauer is the candidate there, and they're working really hard to maintain that seat, and that one is going to be also really essential to making sure that we maintain this trifecta. So off the back of my hand, those are the ones that I'm really focused on. We have done more. If you feel like driving up north, we've got some knocks up north as well, but we've been really everywhere this election cycle, supporting incumbents and then also supporting first-time candidates. And we do
really impressive. We're running out of time. I see Dennis Callanan has his hand up. I want to give him an opportunity to ask his question or make his comment. Dennis?
I'm just curious, you know, with what you do is that it's with Planned Parenthood. Would it be just very similar, or is there something particularly different?
So then this goes to a question that we were talking about before, is kind of what our connection with other orgs is. Planned Parenthood is a great partner. We are different from them. They obviously provide abortion care, where we do a lot of the programming, the clinic escorting, the campus organizing, and I, you know, put a little plug, we do a little bit more door knocking on our election side, where they focus a lot on more independent expenditure spending. So we do similar work, and we're very much in conjunction, and we're all in the same coalitions, but we do a little bit different of work in this space. And they're a national org, so we're focused solely in Minnesota, where they have national partners as well. We are just in Minnesota. We a few years ago we're not affiliated with our national org anymore. So we are really just focused in here on Minnesota and ensuring abortion access in Minnesota.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
There's a couple of issues that substantive issues that we've touched on. I want to dive into a little bit more deeply in the few minutes left. One is the mifepristone question, and it really comes down to whether the interstate mailing of mifepristone, if somebody here in Minnesota mails it to a state that has a ban on abortion, if you know. What are the rules surrounding that? Isn't there a U.S. Supreme Court decision hanging in the balance on mifepristone at the moment? What do you know about that subject?
There is a Supreme Court case, and I'm struggling to know the details of it right now, but mifepristone is still available. It's a great question, and I wish I knew the answer, Ron.
Okay, yeah, I mean,
I-
I'd like to know if a Minnesota clinic can send mifepristone somewhere else without getting into trouble. And I gather that one's not clear to you. Maybe Jim Carlson knows. He's got his hand up again. Jim? You're muted. There you
Thanks
go.
for calling on me. I think Cynthia and Jill are doing a great job, and I don't want to upstage them whatsoever. But I did have a question comment that I want to make to be sure that we cover it, and that is that people who, I mean, I don't necessarily look at abortion as the only issue. It's being able to oversee and decide your own health care. And that's where it doesn't matter whether you're male or female. You don't want to have to go to the government to get the okay to get some certain kinds of health care. You certainly don't want to have someone from the government digging into your background and your history and perhaps your monthly cycles to figure out whether you're going to be guilty of some kind of crime as a woman. You may go there just to have some to go either to a Planned Parenthood or to your own doctor just to get some kind of health care. And what the other side wants to do is to have you log in your periods, your other reasons for going to get your health care. And related to that is that young people, I think, are overwhelmingly opposed to those kinds of oversights. And where you get young people and you have this huge place to mine young people's minds is the campuses. And the campuses, a lot of people are just getting involved in some of these issues because they haven't voted for a president yet. And what we need to do is be sure that we register every person on the campus. And I always go back to 2010, where we didn't do that. We failed. And just this one precinct in Northfield, we had 1,520 people registered at 7 a.m. on election day. And I always ask, how many of those 1,521 pre-registered people voted? And the answer is 37. Only 37. You can look it up. And in fact, I was trying to find my page here that I could send to people. 37 people out of 1,521. And you all remember David Bly, he lost by 34 votes. So if we would have rolled 50 people out, and by the way, David Bly got more votes in that precinct than even the people who didn't have an opponent. It was that good. And the prior year, which was the Obama year, Obama had people on each campus in each school getting people registered and also turning them out on election day. And they did a tremendous job, even in that precinct. So we have to really recognize that there are some places to mine these votes, and people really want to be involved. And when they're young, they want to make sure that they protect their own rights. So having a person, and I did get that message from Jill there, that they are working on campuses, which is excellent. But it is the kind of work that has the best payback in getting people to vote for the progressives that both are running in that area, and also to get progressive votes for Kamala Harris, because that's where we have to make sure that we do not drop the ball. Okay, now the other question, and I don't remember what it was. I'm not sure if I can answer it fully because I am part of that reproductive caucus, but sometimes we have other things that are taking precedence in our thoughts and in our actions. And we have been working on election issues in my committee weekly. We have meetings. We have lots of meetings, and there are things that are coming up constantly on how to protect the certification of votes, the access to the polls, and also trying to tamp down these ridiculous statements about voter fraud and people that are ineligible to vote getting registered to vote and voting. That is a full kettle for us to address. But I really appreciate what Cynthia and Jill are doing. That this is going to win the race for Kamala Harris. No doubt about it. It's going to win the race for our female candidates in the state of Minnesota. It is the biggest issue across the nation that's getting a change in attitude. That's why we had state issues on the ballot in even Kansas that came out pro woman. It's pro woman. So that's what we need to really focus in on and make sure that we do everything possible to get that turnout, to get those young people registered, because they'll take care of it for us because they are progressive.
Well, we have hit our witching hour of 10 o'clock. Cynthia, I was going to ask you to put your contact information in the chat. I see you just did that. Thank you very much. I don't know if you have a specific response to Senator Carlson, but I'd like to give you the opportunity to close out our conversation.
Yeah, well, thank you all for giving us the opportunity. We are a small but mighty team right now, and we're working really hard around the clock to ensure that we're supporting candidates in a variety of different ways. So if you want to join us, feel free to come and knock. If you want to join Representative Vernig, Senator Carlson, or Senator Ryer, they're also Senator Ryer, excuse me, Representative Ryer, gave her a promotion, I guess. They're doing great work as well to ensure that we're turning out choice up and down the ballot in the state. And then, we are working not only in the election side. Jill highlighted all of our programming, and we work in conjunction with so many different organizations and groups that do this work. So if this is something that really calls you, we are working all the time. So feel free to volunteer with us, become a clinic escort. If you know anybody in these communities, having conversations around choice, calling your friend, and helping stop this misinformation, particularly around choice, is really, really important. And that's work that we're happy to help you do. If you have any questions around choice, around access, we're happy to answer any of those and continue this amazing work. So thank you all. And I'm headed out to door knock shortly too, so I'll let you know what I hear, but I'm feeling really optimistic, particularly around choice. I, for my day job, do have to meet with Republicans, anti-choice, every now and again, and they're saying abortion isn't being brought up, and I say BS, because every time I go out to door knock, it is getting brought up, and they want, the number one question I get asked is your candidate pro-choice? And resoundingly, the pro-choice candidates are winning on that issue. So thank you all, and keep organizing around choice. Abortion,
Keep
we're trying to
organizing.
make it not a dirty word. It isn't. So
It's a few days to go. Curtis, our vice chair of the Senate district, any thoughts about upcoming events that you'd like to share?
Well, let me just stop the recording for a sec.